Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks. We are covering the second volume of the Grant Morrison X-Men run. That is New X-Men Volume 2, Imperial. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. We are going through a lot of issues for this one. This is a fat trade, Matt. Issues number 118 to 126. Matt, how you doing this evening?
Doing pretty well, Bob. It's a fat trade, but it's a fast read. That's the great part about these.
Yeah, these are early 2000s action comics, so they do read pretty quickly, right? They're not quite as breezy as your Stormwatch or your Authority, but they're still pretty breezy.
And they're nothing like your epic X-Men collections.
No, nothing like your epic Silver Age X-Men collections. I would also say, in my memory, maybe I'm wrong, Grant Morrison's JLA is a little bit more complicated and a slower read than this.
And I do want to stress, too, that while it is a faster-paced read, it's still a great read and a good read and entertaining.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we're not downplaying it because it's a fast pace.
Let's go ahead and plunge into it, Matt. So we're starting with issue number 118. That's Germ-Free Generation Part 1. We've got the Nazi Ethan Van Sciver on art, unfortunately. And luckily, Matt, I can begin with an art complaint, which is nice because the messed up thing is that even though Van Sciver is a Nazi, I usually like his art. But on page 6, we've got Jean Grey sitting in Cerebra, watching TV in Cerebra. And when I first saw this, I have to ask Matt, because I can't tell what this is. Is she petting a cat? Is she petting an owl? Is she petting a rabbit? Is there some symbolism going on here? But Matt, what is that in Jean Grey's lap as she watches TV in Cerebra?
I thought Bob was going crazy at first, but I turned to the actual page, and I did not know what it was either. I zoomed in far using my iPad, and it is a bag of chips, Bob. She's eating some chips.
Once you put that in my mind and I looked at it, I was, oh, okay. But yeah, I could not see the bag of chips when I first looked at it.
This is important because for continuity purposes, if you go over 2 additional pages, she's walking around with the bag of chips in hand. So it's the cat, and the Scarlet Witch turned it into one. Fleetos too, Bob. No, original tortilla chips. It even has that beneath it. So you need some salsa to go with it.
She's eating chips dry. That's pretty unsettling, man.
It's a very salty snack for Jean Grey to have.
There actually is a lot of corporate logo stuff in this issue. I'm looking at the scene where Jean and Scott are standing over Hank, who's in a coma, which is an interesting scene. Van Sciver does some interesting things with Beast's huge cat body in the bed, but Cyclops is handing a thing of Kleenex to Jean that has a weird off-corporate label to it, too. I guess that's the thing with Nazis, man. They like their off-brand jokes.
Brand creative licensing.
Matt, I had another question. On the next page from Scott passing Jean the Kleenex, Scott is getting asked by Jean if he had sex with Emma in Hong Kong. And Scott's reply is, no, I didn't. She kept me awake all night. Is admitting that they did, or is that Scott making a joke and it not landing?
I don't know, Bob, because Scott is the way Morrison writes Scott here, they make him seem not quite they don't make him as emotional as what I would assume. There is not as much emotion behind his statement as what you would expect, especially with the way this conversation is going.
Yeah, which calls back to that scene we liked in the first trade where Wolverine admires Scott's icy calm lunacy.
If I read this in the voice actor's voice from X-Men the Animated Series, I know that's a weird way to do it, but I told you I'd do this. This is my method. If I do it that way, it makes it sound like he's making a joke.
I think it has to be a joke. When I was rereading this, I was, oh, is this how he confesses the affair to Emma? Then in the next trade, we get to the start of the Scott and Emma affair, and it does seem it's the start of the affair. It doesn't seem it's a replay of Hong Kong. I think this is supposed to be a joke, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Honestly, it sounds like I'm complaining, and maybe on some level I'm complaining, but I also appreciate how Morrison does have this tendency to write things open-ended.
It builds a little bit of tension here because throughout the entire run, Emma plays a huge role in this whole triangle piece with Jean and Cyclops. This dialogue plays into that and builds upon it and builds that tension. It adds more to their characters.
We should also note, in general, this issue 118 is the first appearance of a lot of new characters. It's the first appearance of the Stepford Cuckoos. It's the first appearance of Angel Salvador, and it's the first appearance of Martha Johansson, who is sometimes called No Girl, although that gets confusing. But it is interesting that in this issue, the Cuckoos, Angel, and Martha are not named yet.
And what's insane, Bob, is that last volume we were talking about how Morrison kind of mimics the original team of X-Men with Emma Frost replacing Iceman, but now having this ability to diamond up her body the same way Iceman ices over her body. But we didn't have an Angel, but now we
Although
do.
we did have an Angel in the sense that we had Wolverine in the romantic triangle with Scott and Jean, like Warren was in the original Silver Age comics.
But now we have a female version of Angel who comes from a very poor background. Her actual name is Angel. Her wings are not beautiful angel wings. They're nasty, like insect-type wings. She doesn't act like the prim proper Warren Worthington. Much more of a very angry female teenager.
Our cliffhanger is a rather nasty scene, although nasty in an effective way, as Wolverine is walking in on John Sublime's U-Men who are harvesting mutant organs, and they're about to harvest Angel Salvador's organs. They've got her tied down to a gurney in a suggestive way that in an interesting way mimics how Beast is resting in the gurney in his coma earlier in the issue.
The other thing, too, is the U-Men taking these particular wings is interesting as well, because when you think about the U-Men coming after someone, they would want angel wings if they really wanted something.
The sense I get from this arc is that they're not just going to get the wings, they're going to get a lot of her organs.
The DNA and everything, too, as well.
Sublime tries to use every part of it. We should move ahead to issue number 119, Germ-Free Generation Part 2. Here we've got a new artist who's going to be pretty prominent in these two trades. His name is Igor Korty. And he's a pretty controversial artist. There was a fair amount of backlash to his art on the Morrison run of X-Men, and Korty didn't do much else in American comics. I don't like to diss on art on this show, but Korty's not very on model, and some of his character work is pretty grotesque, and not grotesque in an interesting way like Frank Quitely's art or Gary Frank's art, but grotesque straight up. We're going to have a lot of Korty art for this run. And to answer a question that Matt has coming up, even though I'm going to try not to dog on Korty too much, it's not to my taste.
It's not to my taste either, although there are some pages where you can tell he put more effort in.
To defend Korty, apparently he's pretty popular in Europe. And I guess he said in response to some of the backlash to this art that he was rushing this art.
Oh, that makes sense.
I would be interested to read one of Korty's European graphic novels to see what that's like. I could imagine I might have a much better reaction to his art in the context of, okay, it's not about characters like the X-Men that I have this deep attachment to. He also did a Star Trek Next Generation graphic novel right before the Morrison run. It was for Wildstorm, and it was called Gorn Crisis. It was written by Kevin J. Anderson, so it's probably terrible, but I'm mildly curious to read it.
Especially with all the Gorn stuff from Strange New Worlds. We have a whole different understanding of them now. I wonder what they were doing back then.
Good point. I didn't think about that. Give that a look and see if it would be interesting for us to do around Strange New World Season 4. That might be interesting.
Listeners, I know talking about sometimes with podcasting, you're just hearing us talk about art. To give you an idea, the way people's faces are drawn by this particular artist, everyone looks old in the face and long in the face. That's one distinguishing thing about this art. Everybody looks old and rugged, and their features are often way bigger than what you're used to seeing. Their bone structures.
You wanted to bring this up in both this issue 119 and in the prior issue 118. We see Emma take a lot of shots to the face.
I read this the first time through a couple of years ago. I had to stop for a moment. She gets punched straight in the face, and it's out of nowhere, and her nose is bloodied, and you don't expect Emma to be in a fist fight, is what it boils down to.
Do internet archaeology and try to find people being angry about Korty's art over the years, but I imagine both it feeling off-model to people and this violence against Emma in these two issues are probably why people reacted poorly to it.
Not to defend this, because punching a person in the face is not a good thing, especially a woman. But the way that it triggers her diamond form from a narrative plot perspective, that was interesting and unique. That was cool on Morrison's part because it was essential to the plot. Now, had it not been, then I probably would have been, Morrison, you're doing this to get viewers, to be controversial. But the fact that it was tied to triggering her power made me feel, okay, I get what they're doing here.
Emma's response to getting her nose broken, being mainly upset about how much she paid for the plastic surgery on the nose. Yeah. I find that pretty funny and pretty in character for Emma. If it rubs you the wrong way, I totally get it. Violence against women is a serious thing. I see why this could upset people, but I thought Emma's reaction was handled well.
She's written in character. It's part of the narrative, so it makes sense narratively from a plot perspective.
Speaking of grotesque things, we've got some really good scenes in this of Wolverine having rescued Angel from the U-Men. So Wolverine and Angel are sitting in a rib shack out in the boonies, and this fat racist rib shack owner comes up and confronts them because Wolverine is pulling a piece of shrapnel out of his neck, and it causes Angel to do like her acid
Yeah.
fly vomit thing. It's a pretty cool scene.
Got a serious question for you, Bob. If Wolverine would go to restaurants that aren't out in the middle of nowhere, every time we see Wolverine go somewhere, he goes to somewhere out in the middle of the country or to some random rib shack. He doesn't go to McDonald's or Burger King or somewhere that's corporate where they probably wouldn't be able to say anything to him if this went down.
He doesn't want to not be hassled. He wants to go to these backwoods rib shacks and then get in fight with the local racist rednecks.
Oh, I thought he was trying to transport Angel back to the mansion. He could just stop at Chick-fil-A or something on the way.
I would like to think that Wolverine would not support Chick-fil-A contributions.
Bob, there is a scene in this issue, though, where, page 6, Cyclops blows the dick off a statue with his optic blast. That's some symbolism. It has to do with him and Jean.
To keep moving, we have the cliffhanger at the end of 119, which is the U-Men are busting down the gates of the X-Mansion. So that puts us into issue number 123, Germ-Free Generation Part 3, the end of this Germ-Free Generation arc with John Sublime. Did you have anything to say about 120, Matt? I didn't have much to say other than to note what the cliffhanger was.
I did not. Really good scenes, though, with Emma and Scott getting around the human, having kidnapped them. You've got some really good scenes, too, of Jean using her powers. She's going full Phoenix Force at some points.
Yeah.
There's a full-page spread at one point in this issue where she has the fire all around her, and everybody's looking at her. Do we need to be worried?
Wolverine has the great line about the blind people saw you in Seattle.
Then, Bob, you got the cliffhanger at the end here, which I remember reading this originally, and I think I was inebriated the last time I read this. I almost cried a little bit when I saw poor Cassandra Nova's body with Charles Xavier's mind trapped in there and Beast's sad face.
I like that it's all more or less from Angel Salvador's perspective. So her first encounter with the X-Men is wounded Beast running out, cradling this corpse of a naked old woman, yelling that somebody's mind is trapped inside it.
It's pretty creepy. And you've also got some kind of Michael Jackson kid over to the left. You've got kid with eyeballs on neck. Then you've got the Stepford Cuckoos.
I think those are not eyeballs. I think those are mouths.
Zoom in as far as I can. Yes, Bob, you're right. They are mouths. The child has mouths on its neck.
I think her code name is Chorus.
Ah, creative. Who's the Michael Jackson kid?
Oh, I don't know. With the Morrison run, because they introduce all of these new students, and they don't necessarily introduce them deeply or thoroughly, and some catch on. The Cuckoos catch on. You'll see Beak and Angel Salvador here and there in future. Then some don't catch on at all.
It's similar to how it was in the films, because you had a lot of characters that were background mutants that did random things here or there.
As much as I hate to say it, both the films and the Morrison run are working under the shadow of Harry Potter here, emphasizing the school nature of the X-Men in a way that was present before, but it was never emphasized as much as it is in the Morrison run or in the film.
I was actually going to ask you about that after reading last issue, because we had taken our trek to the Silver Age of X-Men, and there is the school aspect there, but they're all members of the X-Men. All the members of the school are also members of the X-Men. Whereas, at least in that Silver Age run, he didn't have anybody else living in the mansion.
In the 80s and the 90s, you mostly outsource it to other teams, right? Where you have the New Mutants in the 80s and Generation X in the 90s, who are supposed to be the up-and-coming generation. And I can't remember the 90s that I don't think there are a lot of non-X-Men mutant students at the school in the 90s. I think that really comes about with the Morrison run, and also there's another New Mutants run around the same time as the Morrison run. But maybe I'm forgetting stuff, and maybe they do emphasize there being non-X-Men but still mutant students at the school in the 90s that I'm just not remembering. Should we move ahead to probably the best issue in the collection, issue number 121, Silence, Psychic Rescue in Progress?
Not a ton to say here.
Oh, I got a ton to say. I love this issue. Did you remember, Matt, that back in 2001, 2002, Marvel did a silent month thing where every issue that came out that month was a silent issue?
I just thought this was a creative choice on Morrison's part.
editorially
Wow.
mandated. Eventually, we're going to do Ecstatics. I don't know if I'm in a hurry to do Ecstatics, but eventually we're going to do Ecstatics, and Ecstatics has a silent issue. Then the only other two I remember are there's a Black Panther one that Christopher Priest did where you see Black Panther and Iron Fist, who's possessed, have a fight. Then there's a Brian Bendis and Alex Maleev Daredevil one where you see Daredevil fight a series of assassins silently.
Was there a reason for this?
There's that famous silent issue of G.I. Joe. It's all an homage to that. I don't know if it was a specific anniversary for that G.I. Joe issue because I'm not a G.I. Joe fan.
Well, listeners, I'm a slight G.I. Joe fan, and I'm going to add a little bit of context here because that silent issue followed the character of Snake Eyes.
I think they've done a few silent issues since then in G.I. Joe. But yeah, Marvel didn't have the rights to G.I. Joe in 2001, 2002, but Marvel was publishing G.I. Joe when that silent issue came out. Besides this being the silent issue gimmick, is that we have Frank Quitely back, and it's nice to see Quitely back. And thinking about it after our starting to discuss Igor Korty, I do see why they might have thought Igor Korty makes an interesting or useful replacement to Frank Quitely. I don't think it works, but thinking about it more, they both Quitely and Korty do have these slightly grotesque styles, and so I see why people thought that, okay, having Korty works as a replacement for Quitely.
In the early odds, they were, X-Men needs to be weird, so we need weird art, we need weird stories, and we need to push the envelope a little bit.
You get Morrison partially because Morrison did JLA, but also because Morrison did Doom Patrol and Invisibles for Vertigo, which are weird superhero team books, right?
But those JLA books are damn good.
They are. And weirder than you would think for JLA books, but it's more mainstream superhero than the new X-Men. My favorite panel in the silent issue 121 is on page 4, where Emma takes a swig from her flask before she goes into Xavier's mind. My guess at your favorite panel was going to be on page 10, where we see Jean's hair making a phoenix symbol.
Actually, that was my favorite until I got to page 13, Bob.
Page 13.
It's big old head. I want you to look at the image, though, because it's fascinating. He's got crutches out to the side. He's got what looks like there's some kind of vehicle or something that's supposed to be like forming around him. He's got mannequins with gas masks. He's got one's a female, one's a male. They're not wearing clothes. He's got images on the back. One is a clown woman with a face. I'm assuming it's supposed to be his sister that's not, and then there's somebody with a hat, and there's a happy family on the other one. What does all this mean?
I think the gas mask might be in part an attempt to do a Sandman reference, a Vertigo Sandman.
Oh, he's trapped like a dream.
The vehicle thing orbiting his huge head is interesting because on the one hand, it looks like a vehicle, but on the other hand, it looks like the Cerebro helmet, especially that X at the top.
I'm trying to figure out the wheels on the bottom.
I'm not sure if those could be wheels, but they also could be earpieces. It's weird.
Perhaps, Bob, Professor X's mind is the vehicle which runs the X-Men.
Perhaps. And it also does recall the scene we're going to get to later of Jean holding all the silverware around her head telekinetically.
On the next page, though, did you enjoy the scene of Jean swimming with Professor Xavier's parents' sperm?
You really need to see the secret origin of Cassandra Nova, and that means seeing Brian's Xavier sperm go to Sharon Xavier's egg.
Bob, how did you feel about the two fetuses battling it out?
I thought it was pretty funny, to be honest.
I did not expect to see that when I opened this issue, but it was quite fascinating, especially when Professor X gets the advantage.
We've talked about in the first trade about this is the run where the X-Men kill, and we find that goes back all the way back to when Professor X was in the womb.
I want you to keep in mind what Professor X looks like with his big old head here towards the end of this issue, because it fits in later on in our next volume we cover.
I do love the cliffhanger for this issue too, which is the last page where we've had some interesting cheats with Jean and Emma spelling out things using substances while in Xavier's mind. But then we actually get dialogue on the last page where Jean says to Cyclops and Wolverine as she and Emma step out of the room, Professor X tried to kill his twin while they were both still in the womb. We ought to talk.
This sums up the whole plot there, right there. We're good.
Very convenient if you struggle to
Yeah.
process comic art without
In
dialogue.
case you didn't understand what happened in the previous 25 pages.
Gene really brings it together. To move into the next arc, all the issues have different names, but it seems to be a 5-part story we're coming into. And issue number 122 is called Imperial, which gave the name for the trade. And I would have to say my favorite panel of this, and we still got quietly on the art for 122, is on page 10, where Emma Frost is talking to the assembled students of the Xavier School. And she says, "The whole world is watching. We must be nothing less than fabulous."
That sounds like some Bravo.
It does feel Emma is doing RuPaul's Drag Race, which I think is intentional on Morrison's part.
It is.
Sure,
She's well written.
Morrison does great work with Emma.
Smasher has to come back to Earth somehow and warn us.
So the cliffhanger for issue 122, and I thought this might be your favorite panel, Matt, is that we have Smasher crash to Earth in a field somewhere, and he's getting out his warning, but the only person who hears it is a cow, and the cow just moos at Smasher.
I was just impressed that I know enough about Smasher to know the different iterations of the character. Wow.
But do you remember which Legion of Superheroes member Smasher is a copy of?
Bob, why do you do this to me?
Ultra Boy, the one who has all of Superboy's powers, but only one at a time. I was wondering while reading this, Matt, so we did the Hickman Avengers run previously, dear listeners, and if you enjoy our Morrison coverage, you should go back and look at our Hickman Fantastic Four and Avengers coverage. Great stuff. But Hickman, well-documented fan of Morrison, and I started to wonder, it wouldn't have to be, but I could imagine that the reason that Hickman decided to have a new Smasher character for his Avengers run and to really emphasize his new Smasher's origins as being a farm girl, I wonder if the end of this issue influenced that.
Probably did. I did prefer the new Smasher to this one because I don't know much about this one. He seems like a generic dude.
A generic Shi'ar guy. Yeah. I don't think there's much to know of.
We knew so much about the other one. She had a baby. She would cannonball. Yeah. We thought there might be a triangle thing with her and Sunspot.
Although she also has a believable, the wife that really dislikes her husband's best friend, Sergi, with Sunspot.
Her grandpa played a really important role.
Some Golden Age hero, I forget which. To keep moving to issue number 123, Matt, that's Testament. Skyver's back on art, but you wanted to talk about the cover.
Yeah, we get the most Hugh Jackman cover ever.
We're getting to this thing where we don't really have plot covers. All of the covers for these issues are pretty much solo shots of characters from the run, but a lot of times they're not closely tied to what's appearing in the issue. You might have Angel Salvador or Beak on the cover, but it's not an issue that really features Angel or Beak.
There's glamour shots to sell books.
Matt, you had a question about Jean Grey's name.
They specifically make sure in this particular run that she refers to herself as Mrs. Jean Grey Summers. I don't remember if that was a thing in the 90s.
I don't remember if it was a thing in the 90s either. You could maybe read it as a defensive thing of Jean is worried about the marriage falling apart.
That's how I feel when I'm reading it.
I don't remember her doing that in the late 90s. It's been a while since I've looked at late 90s.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if that's what we do in X-Men 97.
They should. My favorite panel from issue 123 is, again, an Emma panel, and it's Emma on page 6, and she's counseling the Stepford Cuckoos that it's okay that young love feels like the invasion of the Dignity Snatchers, while she's counseling the Cuckoos, who are all jealous that Esme, one of the Cuckoos, has fallen in love with this young Japanese mutant. Emma also offhandedly mentions that Tom and Jerry are a great couple.
We also got to point out, too, this Japanese student becomes some strange creature thing.
We'll get to that.
But I do want to point out my favorite panel, though, before we do that, Bob, and it's a very simple panel. Beast has been researching why all the X-Men are getting sick. And it's because Cassandra Nova has infected them with microscopic wild sentinels, the sentinels that were introduced in the first volume. She was creating microscopic versions as well. It's funny to see the tiny sentinels in the blood tearing away at the blood cells. That was cool.
But it's cool. I didn't really take note that they were wild sentinels.
They are.
That's fun. So that's your favorite panel. My guess at your favorite panel would be the revelation that the Japanese mutant that Esme is in love with is actually a Shi'ar scout named Stuff. And he reveals himself as this alien blob, and he tells Esme Cuckoo, "You were a fool to believe I loved in you. Prepare to be sterilized."
Oh, man.
That sets us up for the cliffhanger, which is Emma shielding the reunited 5 Cuckoos now because the other 4 Cuckoos were upset about Esme's romance with Stuff. But Emma sheltering all 5 of the Cuckoos from Gladiator. but she's telling Esme, don't worry, don't let this put you off, boys.
All right, Bob. On the cover of page 124, I just want to clarify for you. That is a picture of Zorn, and he is eating potato chips. He's not petting a cat.
Oh, that's actually useful. Thanks. It is weird that potato chips are such a motif in this run.
It was like, what, 2001, 2002?
Everybody's munching on potato chips. This is an issue called Super Destroyer. The art's by Cordy again. He's replaced Van Sciver, who was on the previous issue. It's advancing the plot. It's accelerating the plot. There's not that much to say about it.
The character of Zorn, he was introduced a few issues back. His head's a star.
Yeah, his head's a star. His powers are pretty vague. In this trade, it really emphasizes he has healing powers.
Correct.
Which I don't remember if that really came up in the annual, I have to be honest. Cyclops goes, Zorn is chilling in a monastery after being rescued by the X-Men in the annual that we talked about from the last collection. But then Cyclops and Zorn get captured by the Shi'ar. They're tied up to a big space gun, the Super Destroyer of the title, I believe. Then the cliffhanger of the issue is them breaking out of the space gun, about to mess up some Shi'ar Imperial Guard.
They're set up for a nice big fight scene.
They are. So that takes us to issue number 125, Losers. We still got Cordy on art. I had two guesses for your favorite panel. One of my guesses for your favorite panel was on page 11, where Angel Salvador comes across Beak in the infirmary, and Beak is in bad shape. He's pleading with Angel to get him some pants because pants are a basic human right. And Angel says cheeses instead of Jesus and decides to free Beak. And then that was one guess at your favorite panel. And my other guess was on page 21, where Jean is yelling at Xavier, die, Charles, I'll catch you.
No, it wasn't either of those, Bob. My favorite is a little further ahead, but it's when Wolverine is ushering all the citizens into the danger room while referring to it as that name. He says, citizen, he's get all these citizens into the danger room.
That's funny. So the cliffhanger for 125 is Cassandra Nova is in Xavier's body fighting the Imperial Guard. That brings us to our climactic issue, number 126, All Hell. Frank Quitely's back to finish off the arc.
This is the one, Bob, where you need to go ahead and turn your X-Men animated music on. Good. Boom, da-da-da-da-da-da. Hit it. And the outright, Bob. Does Cassandra Nova without a body just remind you of Proteus?
I wasn't thinking about that while rereading it, but now that you asked me that, it makes total sense. This does feel like Morrison replaying either the Proteus saga or maybe the Legion saga on X-Men.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how I feel. Looks like Proteus. Kind of a similar origin. It's insane.
I had a guess at your favorite panel from 126, and that was when Jean caught his mind after Cassandra Nova's body died. So it's Xavier possessing Jean, and Jean is walking around the halls of the Xavier school weeping blood, but she's consoling the students, and sometimes she's talking like Jean, sometimes she's talking like Xavier. I thought that would be your favorite.
Even the art here, with when they have Jean talking like Xavier, I don't know how they do it, but the face looks slightly different. You can slightly see Xavier in the face.
Quitely is so good. We're going to get some other really good artists in the next trade. And even though Van Sciver's politics are disgusting, Van Sciver often does a pretty good job on art, but Van Sciver is nowhere near as good as Quitely. Igor Cordy is definitely nowhere near as good as Quitely on this stuff. So it's nice to have Quitely back for this climax. In that spirit, my favorite panel is on page 20, where Zorn is putting Nova in Xavier's body in a full Nelson lock, which is a fun moment. And he's also trying to heal both Cassandra and Xavier's body, which will result in our cliffhanger of the issue, which is naked Xavier back in control of his body, walking out of Cerebra because of the full Nelson hold of healing that Zorn put on him.
Well, thankfully they had Zorn, because without Zorn, nothing would have been fixed. Nothing.
Professor X has never walked before. That's never happened. Never been a plot development.
We've never seen this before, ever.
And you'll never see it again. This will definitely never be a plot development later.
You'll also never see Magneto in a wheelchair.
No, and you certainly will never see it done in a ham-handed way to score points on the previous best X-Men run of all time. Yeah. Looking at you, Jed McKay. Still angry about that.
Where do we go to next with this?
All right, we're going to the next trade, which is New X-Men Volume 3, New Worlds. That's not quite as massive as this one. It runs from 127 to, I think, 133.
Anything about this trade, Bob, we need to talk about it now that we've seen it in its entirety? Any big themes we need to talk about?
I think it's pretty straightforward. You were exactly right that it, in some ways, is Morrison doing a Proteus or a Legion story.
Oh,
It's also Morrison doing their Shi'ar story. But it's an interesting Shi'ar story because it's not set in space. It's all about the Shi'ar coming to Earth. So it's acknowledging the cosmic side of X-Men while not actually sending the X-Men into space.
but Beak wants to go to space so
Beak
bad.
does want to go to space, and we'll get to that in the next trade. So, listeners, thanks for going on this journey with us through the Morrison X-Men. Join us next week for New X-Men Volume 3, New Worlds. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.